Hey, what's up developers? Welcome back to the channel. I am Harish Kumar. In my previous video, I showed you how to create a real-time chat app using Laravel Reverb and Vue.js 3, all within one project. Many of you had questions like, is it possible to separate the front-end and back-end projects? Can we use Nuxt 3 for the front-end instead of Vue.js? Well, the answer is yes. And that's exactly what we will be doing today. We are going to build a real-time chat app using Laravel Reverb for the backend and Nuxt 3 for the frontend. And yes, we will be using them as separate projects communicating seamlessly together. I also be using TypeScript in this video. If you are new to TypeScript, this is a great opportunity to learn. But don't worry. If you are not interested in using TypeScript, you can skip those parts and still easily follow along. If you like my tutorials and want to support my work, feel free to check out some of my products. These are Spec Coder AI, a smart VSCode extension for boosting productivity, Ctrl+Alt+Cheat VSCode extension. It has lots of cheat sheets for various languages, and JavaScript eBook covering everything from ES 2015 to ES 2023. I have made detailed videos about each of them, and you can find the links in the video description below. Now without wasting more time, let's dive right in. To save time, I have already prepared the Laravel and Nuxt 3 app. In one of my previous videos, I showed you how to implement Nuxt 3 and Laravel Sanctum authentication. If you want to learn how to implement SPA authentication using Sanctum in Nuxt 3, I recommend checking out that video as well. You can find the link in the video description. In that Nuxt Sanctum authentication tutorial, I have created this repository, Nuxt Sanctum authentication demo. For this tutorial, I have forked it and created a new repository called Nuxt 3 Laravel Reverb Chat. In this repository we have Laravel API as a backend and Nuxt 3 app as a frontend, which I have already set up on my local machine. This one VSCode editor has Laravel app and the other has the Nuxt 3 app. Let's start the app and see this in the browser. So in the Laravel app, let's open the terminal, and here I'll run php artisan serve. And in the Nuxt 3 app, let's open the terminal, and here I will run npm run dev. Let's open this URL in the browser, so copy this. The app is loaded in the browser. Now let's log in. Here email is harish@example.com, password, and click this login button. We are successfully logged in. Let's go to the dashboard. Here you can see we have list of users fetched from the Laravel API. When I click on a user, it navigates to the chat page. On this page, we have chat UI. And when you enter a message in this input field, it displays the chat message right here. But everything is static for now. In this tutorial, we will integrate the Laravel Reverb and Nuxt 3 app to make the chat dynamic and real time. First, let's take a look at the code we have so far. We will quickly review the setup for the both backend and frontend apps. So now let's jump into the code, review it inside the editor, starting with our Laravel app. Let's open the routes api.php. To save time, I have added the logic directly into the routes file, but it's better practice to place the logic inside controller for a cleaner, more organized structure. This route simply returns the detail of the user who is currently logged in, that we have already seen in the previous video. This second route is the get request to the users, which returns a list of all users except the currently logged in user. We are using Auth Sanctum middleware to make sure only authenticated user can see this list. This route is the get request to this path, which returns details about a specific user when you click on their profile or name. Alright, now that we have looked at Laravel API side, let's switch over to Nuxt 3 frontend and see how we are displaying the user list and setting up the chat interface. So let's go to the Nuxt 3 app. We will start by reviewing pages dashboard.view. The main job of this page is to display a list of users from the API and click on the user to start chatting. Let's break it down. The first thing, we have this SEO meta function. This is a simple setup to define the SEO metadata for the page. In this case, the title is set to dashboard. Next, we use the define page meta to protect the dashboard page with a auth middleware. Now the key part of this dashboard is fetching the list of users from the Laravel API. We are using async data to make an asynchronous request to fetch the users. And the second argument is this function that makes the API call. That's where we use sanctum fetch, which is a composable from the Nuxt sanctum authentication module. I have already explained the use sanctum fetch in detail in the previous video, but to give a quick overview, it handles CSRF tokens and cookies automatically, so you don't have to worry about manually managing them when making authenticated API request. In this case, we are making a GET request to API users, which will return a list of users excluding the logged in user, and we store this list in the users variable. Next, we displayed this users list in the template section. Here we created a section that lists all users. If users array has data, we loop through array using v for loop and created a card for each user. When you click on a user, it navigates to the chat page for that specific user using Nuxt link. We have also added some basic styling with the Tailwind CSS to make the user list look clean and responsive. Next, let's move on to the chat interface. Go to chats, this in square bracket id.view. This id in the square bracket means the chat page is dynamic with the id parameter represent the user you are chatting with. So here if we try to visit /chat/1, here this 1 represent the user id. Next, here we set the page title, chat messages, and this auth middleware ensures that only authenticated user can access the chat interface. Next, we extracted the user ID from the routes parameter, which allow us to load the correct chat conversation with the selected user. Using this, we retrieve the currently authenticated user from the use sanctum composable. This use sanctum composable is from the Nuxt sanctum authentication module that we have already seen in the previous video. Next, here we fetch the detail of the selected user you are chatting with. For now, I have set up some dummy chat messages just to show how they will look. We will replace this and fetch messages from the database and update in real time as users send and receive messages. Right now, we have defined this chat interface directly inside this script section like this. It defines the structure of chat messages, which includes the message ID, sender ID, receiver ID, and actual text. It is best practice to keep all the types and interfaces in a dedicated file. So I'm going to remove this chat interface from here, and inside the types directory, here we have index.ts. In this file we already have interfaces for validation errors and users, and right here I will paste the chat message interface. This way the chat message interface is available globally and we can use it across any component or file in our project without having to redefine it. Next, we also have this function defined right here to automatically scroll to the bottom of the message list whenever new messages are added. So whenever a new message is added to the variable messages array, this watch function triggers and it calls this function This function scrolls the chat window to the most recent message. For sending messages, we have this send message function. This function checks if the new message value is not empty, then it adds the new message to messages variable right here. Right now we have added this hard coded. In a full real-time setup, this message would be sent to the backend, which will broadcast the message to other users. Now let's look at the template section of this file where we have rendered the chat UI. First we displayed the chat username in the header, and then messages are shown inside a scrollable container. Here we checked if the message is sent by the current user, display this in the blue color, while the messages from the other users appear on the left side with a light gray background. Right here we have input field for typing a new message. User can either press enter or click on this button to send their messages. Now that we have our structure in place, let's get to the exciting part, making this chat app real time with Laravel Reverb. First we need to create a chat message model in the Laravel app. To do this, let's go to the Laravel app, open the terminal, let's stop this php artisan serve command. To create chat message model, here I'll run the command php artisan make model chat message and -m flag to create migration file. Here it has created the chat message model, and this is the migration it has created. Let's close this and let's go to the database migrations, chat messages migration. Here it is going to create chat messages table, and in this table we are going to have table for an ID, receiver ID, and then we have table for an ID, sender ID. Next I will have table text. It is going to have column name text, which is going to store chat messages. Now let's run the migration. So in the terminal, php artisan migrate. Next let's take a look at the chat message model. So in the app models chat message, first thing in this chat message model, let's define the fillables, and this fillable is going to have sender ID, receiver ID and text. Next we will create a sender and receiver relationship methods, public function sender, and it is going to return, and the spec coder has auto completed it for us. Let's accept this. Here it linked the sender ID with the user model, so we can access the detail of the user who has sent the message. Next let's create the relationship method receiver. So method receiver, again spec coder has auto completed it for us, exactly what we need. Let's accept this. It has linked the receiver ID with user model. It is done. Now let's move on to the next step, creating the route to fetch and store chat messages. So in the routes api.php, here first we are going to create a get request at messages and the user. This route going to retrieve all the chat messages between the currently authenticated user and the user specified this user parameter in the route. But instead of writing all this from scratch, I am going to use a snippet that I have already created and saved in my Ctrl+Alt+Cheat extension. So let's open the Ctrl+Alt+Cheat panel. Here we have snippet to query to retrieve all the chat messages. So let's copy this and close this. Now in the API route, here let's return the query. Now let's import this chat messages model. Next we need this user that we will get using the route model binding. So let's copy this from here and paste it here. Next it needs this request. So here we will say request $request. First, this chat message query creates a query to fetch the chat messages. In this where condition, we are going to make query that where sender ID is currently logged in ID and this receiver ID is going to be this selected user. Next, in the or where condition, we will do opposite. Here the sender ID is going to be the selected user ID and the receiver ID is going to be the currently logged in user ID. Next, we eager loaded this sender and receiver relationship methods. Finally, we ordered these messages by their ID in ascending order so that the chat history is in the correct sequence. Next, here I will also add auth sanctum middleware. The AI has auto completed it for us. Let's accept this. This is how we fetch the chat history from the database. Next, let's set up the post request to store chat messages. So here I'll create post request messages user. Next, here I will call closure function. First, in the closure function, let's add the route model binding for this user $user, and I also need request object, so request $request. Next, here I will validate the request message, so here I'll say request validate. The AI has auto completed for us. Let's accept this. The message is required and it should be string. Next, here I will store the message in the database, so $message is equal to chat message create, and here I will pass, and again Spec Coder has auto completed it for us, exactly what we need. Let's accept this. Here instead of this message column we have text. After that we will return this created message. Now let's move on to the Nuxt app. In the chat interface, this is where we will fetch the chat messages from the API and allow user to send new message. Let's scroll up. Here I am going to remove these dummy chat messages and replace them with the use async data composable to make request asynchronously, and the Spec Coder AI has auto completed it for us, exactly what we need. Let's accept this. Let's fix this TypeScript interface. In our case, that is chat message. Let's move this into the next line to make it clearly visible. In the use async data, the first argument is going to be the unique identifier for this request, and in the second argument it is going to be the closure function that makes the request to the API messages using use sanctum fetch. Next, we are going to extract the data from the API request, so const in the curly braces we are going to have data, and let's rename these to messages. If you scroll down, here we have TypeScript error that messages.value is possibly null. So to fix this, right here we are going to give a default value for these messages. So for that, in the third argument we are going to pass a object. In this object we are going to pass default option, and here let's define a arrow function that returns a empty array. And also let's define that this array is type of chat messages array, so colon chat messages. Next, these messages are displayed in the template section right here using this for loop. Next, we are going to handle this input field to send messages. So let's go to the function send message. Let's remove this. Now here to send the message we need to send a API request. So here I'll say await use sanctum fetch, and here I am going to make request to API /messages/ and then we will pass the selected user ID. In the second argument we are going to pass object, and here we will specify that the method is post request and the request body is going to be the object that has message, and the message is new message dot value, and this API request going to return a chat message object. So here I will specify the TypeScript interface chat message, and next we are going to say const message response, and we are going to push this messages response into the chat messages variable. So here I'll say messages dot value dot push message response. Alright, now let's test everything in the browser. So in the terminal, the dev server is already running. So next in the Laravel app, let's open the terminal. Here let's run php artisan serve. Let's go to the browser. Now dashboard, let's open any user, let's say this one, and here let's open the inspect tool in the network tab. Now from this input field, if I type any message, let's say hello, it has made a request to this API, but we are getting 500 error. Let's see this, and it says that in the chat messages table it does not have the column named sender ID. Let's see this. So in the Laravel app, here we are storing the sender ID, and the messages table we have sender ID. Let's roll back the migration and run the migration again. php artisan migrate rollback, php artisan migrate, and let's run php artisan serve. Go back, clear this, and try one more time. This time it worked. It has stored the message and returned the newly created message in the response, and that message is displayed right here. Now let's refresh. Once the page is reloaded, the chat messages are fetched from the API and they are displayed right here. Great. Let's try one more time. How are you? Great, it is working. It has made the request to API, message is stored, and the new message is displayed right here. Reload the page and it has fetched the messages from the API and displayed it right here. Now that we have the basic functionality in place, it's time to take it to the next level by making our chat app real time using Laravel Reverb. So first let's commit all these changes. So in the Laravel app, here first add this chat model and migration table, and I'm going to generate the commit message using Spec Coder AI. We can do this by clicking this generate commit message icon. Immediately you can see it has created the commit message, add chat message model, and the migration. And let's commit this API route also, add to git stage, generate commit message, and commit. Next in the index.ts we have this TypeScript interface. Let's add this to the stage and generate commit message, commit this. Next let's add this chat page and generate commit message and commit changes. Now close all of these. Now our next step is to install Laravel Reverb in the Laravel app. So in the Laravel app, let's open the terminal and stop this artisan serve command, and here I will run the command php artisan install broadcasting. This command will install the Laravel Reverb and add necessary configurations. So let's press enter. It has asked, would you like to install Laravel Reverb? Yes, we want that. So select yes and press enter. Next it asks if we want to install node dependencies for broadcasting like Pusher.js and Laravel Echo. Even though we won't be using these directly into our Laravel app, we will still install them because they will publish the echo.js file, which we will copy it into our Nuxt 3 app. So select yes and press enter. It is done. Now let's quickly review what changes it has made. In the composer.json file, it has added the Laravel Reverb, and in the package.json, it has installed this Laravel Echo and Pusher.js, and it has published the configuration files broadcasting.php and reverb.php. Next, in the bootstrap.js file, it has imported this echo and it has published this echo.js, and this is important because we will copy and use it in our Nuxt 3 app. And it has also created this channels route file for handling real-time broadcasting. Let's commit all these changes. Commit message not generated, that is because of this composer log file and package.log file. Generate commit message again. The commit message is feed add reverb support. Great. Add these to stage and commit. Next, let's look at the .env file right here, and let's scroll down and make sure that it has set the broadcast connection to reverb. And at the bottom, you will see that it has added the reverb environment variables. Now I will copy these environment variables from here, and let's go to the Nuxt free app. Let's close this and open the .env file, paste them right here. I will also rename them to the Nuxt public prefix so they can be accessible to the front end. So here I will say Nuxt public. Next, let's update this in the Nuxt config.ts. So let's open the Nuxt config.ts. Here I will add the runtime config option, and in this runtime config it will have public object. In this public object I will specify the reverb environment variables. So let's paste this. And here I'll say process.env.nuxt public reverb app id, and let's copy this. Let's paste all of these here. For reverb app id we have Nuxt public reverb app id. For reverb app key we have this reverb app key. Let's copy this and paste it here. Reverb app secret, paste that here. Reverb host, this one, paste that here. And reverb port, this one, paste that here. Reverb schema, reverb scheme, paste that here. Now that we have got the reverb environment variables set up in our Nuxt 3 app, it is time to install Laravel Echo and Pusher.js into the Nuxt app to handle real-time events. So in the Nuxt 3 app, let's open the terminal. So here I'll run npm install Laravel Echo and Pusher.js. It is done. Next we need to integrate Laravel Echo with our Nuxt 3 app. To do that, we will create Laravel Echo Plugin. So let's close this and close all of these. Here I'll create a plugins directory. Inside this plugins directory, I will create a file laravel-echo.client.ts. Now you may ask that why this client.ts? It ensures that this plugin is only loaded on the client side, since Laravel Echo requires browser-specific APIs like WebSockets. One great thing about Nuxt 3 is that it automatically registers and loads any plugins files placed inside this plugins directory. This means that we don't need to manually import or register the plugin anywhere in our app. Nuxt takes care of it for us. Next, let's create the plugin to initialize Laravel Echo in the Nuxt. So here, let's export default define Nuxt plugin, and this plugin going to have a closure function. Now inside this function, we will initialize the Laravel Echo. So let's jump over to the Laravel app. Let's close this and let's navigate to resources, JS, echo.js. I'm going to copy all of this code from here and let's go to the Nuxt 3 app, and inside this function, let's paste that here. And these imports should be outside this function. So let's remove it from here and paste that here. Here you may notice that on this window.pusher and window.echo has error property echo does not exist on type window. This happening because TypeScript doesn't know that you would have added a new property to the global window object. To resolve this, we need to declare these two new properties on the global window object. So here I'll say declare global. Again, Spec Coder AI has auto-completed it for us. Let's accept this. Inside this global, we have interface window, and in this window interface, we have added this new property pusher of type pusher, and this echo, which is type of echo. Once we declare this, the errors should disappear. The TypeScript will no longer complain about window.pusher and window.echo. Alright, now we need to update our echo configuration options and make use of the environment variables we have set up in the Nuxt config.ts. These one. To do this, we will start by grabbing the environment variables using the use runtime config function. So here I'll say const config is equal to use runtime config. Next here I'm going to remove this and I will say config.public.reverb app key, and here it is going to be config.public.reverb host, and it is going to be config.public.reverb port. Here also it is going to be same reverb port, and next here I'll say config.public.reverb scheme. It is done. Next here I'll return an object that has provider, and this provider we will specify echo, that is window.echo, this one. Or instead of this, what we should do, here I'll say const echo, and right here we will say window.echo is equal to echo variable, and we are going to pass this echo right here in the object if both these names are same. So instead of this we can only specify echo like this. It's done. Now our next step is very important. When your frontend and backend are separate, like in our case, we need to configure a few things to make everything work. So in the browser, let's open the Laravel Sanctum documentation. Now here, let's focus on this SPA authentication, specifically this authorizing private broadcast channel. Let's navigate to this. Here we need to make these adjustments in our Laravel configuration for private channel to work correctly. It says that you should remove the channels entry from the with routing method contained in your application's bootstrap app.php. Instead, we should invoke with broadcasting method, this one. So let's copy this and let's navigate to the Laravel app, and let's close this and let's go to bootstrap app.php. In our case, in this with routing, I do not have channels routing. In case if you have it, remove it from here, and after this add with broadcasting method that register the channels route with correct middlewares. Next, let's scroll down. Next we need to set up the authorization for pusher to handle private channel in our Nuxt 3 app. The documentation tells us to add custom authorizer when we set up Laravel Echo. So let's copy this custom authorizer from here, and in the Nuxt 3 app, inside the Laravel Echo plugin, I'm going to paste the custom authorization into this Echo configuration right here. We will fix this TypeScript's error in a moment. First, look at this. Here, Authorizer makes the post request to this API broadcasting auth path to authorize the user for private channel. It is using Axios to make this request. However, since we are not using Axios in our Nuxt app, we will replace it with our own implementation. So let's remove this Axios request. Now before adding our own implementation, let's first fix these TypeScript errors. Here let's say channel type is any, and this options is going to be any. Next, this socket ID is going to be string, and this callback function is going to be channel authorization callback, and make sure to import this from the pusher.js library. Now here for authorization, I will use sanctum fetch composable provided by the Nuxt Sanctum authentication module that we have already covered in the previous video. Now in this use sanctum fetch, the first argument is going to be the request path. In our case, that is API/broadcasting/auth, and in the second argument, here I'll pass method post, and next in the body it is going to be object, and in this object it has these two options. Let's copy this and paste it here. It has socket ID, this socket ID variable, this one, and the channel name is equal to channel.name. And after successful request, so then let's pass the arrow function, and it has response. In this successful response, we are going to call this callback. So here we will call callback function. In the callback function, the first argument is going to be error or null. So this is the successful result. So here we will pass null, and the second argument is going to be the auth data. So let's pass this response. And on error, so dot catch, pass the arrow function, and this arrow function will have error of type error, and in this catch block also we will call callback function. This is all done. Our next step is to broadcast messages from Laravel API and receive them in the Nuxt free frontend app. So let's go to the Laravel app, and let's close this and open the routes api.php. Inside this route, after saving this new message in the database, we need to broadcast it to other users, so the other user can receive it in real time. To do this, let's create an event called MessageSent. So in the terminal, here I'll run the command php artisan make event MessageSent. The MessageSent event is created. Now let's open this file, events MessageSent event. The first thing, this MessageSent class should implement the interface should broadcast now. Next, in the construct method, we will pass the chat message model, which will hold the message we want to broadcast. So here let's declare public chat message $message. In this broadcast now method, we need to specify which channel the message should be broadcast to. In our case, we will use private channel, and the channel name should be based on the message receiver ID. So here I'll pass channel name chat dot, and then in the curly braces I'll pass $this message receiver ID. This makes sure that the message is sent to the only user who is supposed to receive it. Next, we need to create this channel route. So let's open the routes channels.php. Here you can see we already have one channel route that checks if the logged in user matches with the certain user ID. This is exactly what we need for the private messaging. So here we will update the channel name to chat. Here this ID is the receiver ID, and this user is the current logged in user. So it matches if the current logged in user is the same the receiver ID. So this ensures that the only receiver can access the private chat channel. Now back to the API route, and let's go to the where we are saving the message. And after saving the message to the database, we need to broadcast the message sent event. So here I will call broadcast method. I will pass new message sent event, and here we will pass this newly created message. Now that we are broadcasting messages from Laravel app, let's move on to the Nuxt app and set up real-time message receiving. So in the Nuxt app, so let's navigate to pages, chats, and this id.view. On this page, we will listen for the message sent event. So let's scroll down. Let's say right here. Here I will extract $echo from the use Nuxt app hook. So here I'll say const in the curly braces $echo is equal to use Nuxt app. This $echo is the instance of Laravel Echo that we set up earlier in the Laravel Echo client right here, this one. Next, in this on-mounted lifecycle hook, we will subscribe to the private channel. Once we subscribe to the channel, we will listen for the message sent event. So here I'll say $echo.private and then the channel name. In our case, that is chat dot and then the receiver user ID. In our case, that is currently logged in user. So here I'll pass current user.value.id. This current user value is possibly null, so here I'll add a if condition. If we have current user value, then subscribe to this private channel. After this, we will listen for the MessageSent event. So here I'll say dot listen, and we want to listen for MessageSent event, and in the next argument we are going to pass a arrow function, and this arrow function has a response, and the response type is object, and this object has message and its type is ChatMessage. Next we are going to push this response message into messages array, and it has auto completed it for us. Let's accept this. Messages.value.push response.message, exactly what we need. Now let's test this in the browser. So before testing out this in the browser, let's open the terminal and run npm run dev, and in the Laravel app let's open the terminal. Here also run php artisan serve. Next let's open the new terminal. Here I will run php artisan reverb start. Now let's go to the browser. Here let's open the inspect tool, and in the network tab let's filter only WebSocket connections and refresh the page. And here we have WebSocket connection request, and its status is 101. That means WebSocket connection is now established. Now let's close the network tab. To properly test the real-time messaging, we need two browser windows. So let's open the incognito window. Let's set both these browsers side by side, and let's open our Nuxt app in this incognito window, and we have this login page. From this side, let's go to the dashboard. Here we are logged in as Harish. So in this browser, let's log in as this user. So here let's enter the email address of this user, enter password. Now we are logged in. Let's go to the dashboard. So from here let's chat with this Harish Kumar, and from here chat with this user. Now let's send a message from here. So let's say test, and immediately we get the message test. Let's send message from this side. Hello, how are you? And immediately we get the message on this side on real time. Great, it is working. Great, our real-time chat functionality is working as expected. Next we add a typing indicator to show when the other user is typing. So in the editor in our Nuxt app, here let's create another variable. Let's say const is user typing is equal to ref, and initially it is false. This variable will be updated whenever the other user starts or stops typing. Next we will create a function send typing event. So const send typing event is equal to arrow function. In this function we will send typing whisper event to the private channel of the other user. So here first let's subscribe to the private channel of other user. So $echo.private, and then the channel name, that is chat dot, and then the selected user ID name, that is going to be user.value.id, and then we will say dot whisper, and here we will whisper the typing event, and here we will pass the current logged in user ID. So here I'll say user ID is current user.value.id. Now let's fix these TypeScript errors. Here it says that the user value is possibly null, and here also same error, current user value is possibly null. So here I'll add a condition: if the user.value or the current user.value is not set, then return from here. If we do not have this user or this current user, then return. After that we will subscribe to this channel and whisper typing event. Now here you may notice that here for whisper, TypeScript is giving us the error property whisper does not exist on the type channel. This error happens because the TypeScript definition for the Laravel Echo channel type does not recognize the Whisper method, even though it is available when using pusher channels for the real-time events. To fix this, we need to extend the TypeScript definition for the channel interface so that it includes the Whisper method. So for that, in the types directory, here I'll create a new file, Laravel Echo.d.ts. Instead of writing everything from scratch, I have already prepared a snippet in the Ctrl+Alt+Cheat extension. So let's open the Ctrl+Alt+Cheat panel, and here in the Laravel Echo, here we have fix Whisper TypeScript error. This one, let's copy this and close this. Now in our file Laravel Echo.d.ts, paste that here. Here first we imported the echo from the Laravel Echo, and then we declare the module Laravel Echo, and here we have interface channel that is extended with the Whisper method. Now let's close this. Now you will notice that TypeScript error for the Whisper method has disappeared. Our next step is to listen for this typing Whisper event in the onMount method right here. So here we will call .listen for Whisper, and here we need to type the event name, in our case that is typing. Next we will pass the arrow function, and the response has this user. So here I will say user ID and it is number, and then here I will say is user typing dot value is equal to response dot user ID is equal to user dot value dot ID. If this response ID is equal to the selected user ID we are chatting with, then its value is going to be true. To make sure the typing indicator doesn't stay on too long, we use a timer that sets the is user typing value to false after 2 seconds if there is no typing. So next, here I'll create another variable, let's say const is user typing timer, and it is equal to ref, and initially it is null. Also let's define its type, and it is going to be Node.js.timeout or null. Next, right here in this listen for Whisper, here I'll check is user typing timer dot value, then clear timeout and pass is user typing timer value. Next, here I'll say is user typing timer dot value is equal to set timeout, and here I'll pass arrow function, and here I'll set is user typing dot value is equal to false, and it should be updated after 2 seconds. It is done. Next we need to make sure this typing event is sent whenever user type. So let's copy this send typing event function and scroll down in the template section. Here we have this input field for the new message. So here I will add a directive key down, and it will trigger the send typing function. So when the key is pressed inside this input field, it will trigger the send typing event function, and that will send the typing Whisper event. Next, let's display the typing indicator. Right here it is commented code. Let's uncomment this, and here I'll add a condition if we have other user and is user typing, then display user.name. It is done. Now let's go to the browser. Let's open the browser side by side. On this browser I'm logged in as Harish, so if I type anything from here, immediately you can see Harish is typing, and type from something here, it is showing this user is typing. Great, the typing indicator works perfectly in real time. Let's send message test, and it is working. From here send message hello, it is working. That brings us to the end of this tutorial on real-time chat app with Laravel Reverb and Nuxt 3. I hope you found it helpful. If you did and want to support my work, feel free to check out some of my products. These are Spec Coder AI, a smart VSCode extension for boosting productivity, Ctrl+Alt+Cheat VSCode extension. It has collection of massive cheat sheets for various languages, and my JavaScript ebook that covers everything from ES 2015 to ES 2023. I have made detailed videos about each of them, and you can find the links in the video description below. Your support goes a long way in helping me create more tutorials and open source projects. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't yet, be sure to like, subscribe and hit the bell icon for more content. See you in the next video. Happy coding!